When I was pregnant with my first child, I worked the overnight shift at a gas station near my house to pick up some extra hours. I know this may not sound amazing, but this gas station was beautiful. It was one of those full market gas stations, and it was in a really nice section of town. I know most stories that take place in these 24-hour settings are usually in dark and eerie places, but I never once felt that way in this company. Usually after 11 o'clock at night, it was slow. I would spend most of my shift watching YouTube or Netflix on my phone, talking to my fiancée or stocking the shelves. I didn't even get that many overnight truck drivers buying coffee or snacks because the gas station wasn't that close to any highways. It was an easy job, especially being pregnant, and it paid well, which was the main reason behind this job. One night early in my shift, a taller man came in. I shouted from behind the counter, "Hey there, how you doing this evening?" The man didn't respond. He didn't even look in my direction. He walked straight into the bathroom. That wasn't that alarming to me, though, if I'm being honest. I knew better than most at this point that when you gotta go, you gotta go. So I just figured that he just really had to go to the bathroom. After nearly 20 minutes, I noticed he had never come out of the bathroom. I was a little concerned and was thinking about knocking on the door to make sure he was all right. I slowly started making my way to the bathroom and saw that he had finally come out. I got a good look at his face at this point. He was as normal looking as can be. He was clean-shaven with a tan complexion. He had short gray hair that was parted and combed nicely. Even though his hair was gray, he couldn't have been older than 40 years old. He was wearing jeans, a flannel, and work boots that looked really beat up. I got the impression that this guy was just some blue-collar worker and he was just stopping to use the restroom. He walked right by me again and didn't say a word. He walked outside but didn't get in any vehicle. He looked like he walked to the side of the building. That's when I noticed that there was no vehicle out there. So whoever this strange man was, he must have walked. That whole ordeal was a little off-putting, but overall I stopped thinking about it just a couple of minutes later since it was uneventful. Part of working these late-night shifts is you get your array of strange individuals. As the night continued, I ended up calling my fiancée and we were just talking on the phone, passing the time. It had to be at least an hour later. The door opened and to my surprise, it was the same guy. This time I didn't say anything to him, figuring that maybe he spoke another language or something. Well, that theory went out the window instantly because instead of walking to the bathroom, this time he walked right up to the counter and asked in a polite voice, "Hello, ma'am. You can't say hello to me?" He smiled as he said it, indicating me that he was joking around. I nervously smiled and responded, "Sorry about that, sir. Hello, how are you doing this evening?" He smiled and only responded with one word in an abrupt tone, "Jerky." I jumped back a little bit and said, "Excuse me?" The man then leaned toward me and in a polite voice changed into a more aggressive voice and he said, "I want beef jerky. Where is it?" I pointed over to the rack where all the jerky and Slim Jims were located. He smiled at me and now in a polite tone once again he said, "Why thank you, ma'am." He slowly walked over to the beef jerky and stopped once he got to the rack. He was standing completely still when he said to me, "You know, you look just like a Disney princess." I was a bit creeped out, but said thank you anyway, just figuring that he was trying to be nice. I look like a lot of things, but one thing I do not look like is a Disney princess, trust me. Without grabbing any jerky, he marched back over to the counter and started to stare at me. I know staring on its own is harmless, but this stare felt intrusive and made me uncomfortable. His eyes were flying around like ping pong balls and he said, "Yeah, that's it. Disney princess. I can see it now." I gave a little half smirk and apparently that wasn't good enough for this man. He started to shout and I mean quite literally started to scream, "What? You don't like Disney?" I didn't even have time to respond before he started to shout again, "My daughter used to like Disney, and now she's just like you." I started to gather that, clearly, this man wasn't right. I had no idea what that statement was even supposed to mean. His daughter is just like me. As calmly as I could, I said, I'm sorry if I offended you, He cut me off and started to scream uncontrollably. At this point, he wasn't saying anything that made any sense at all. It was just a lot of gibberish and nonsense, saying things like, "Instead of a princess, you all want to be the heroes." And even more strangely, I could be a king, and instead, I'm here. It was clear to me that this man was having some sort of nervous breakdown. Thankfully, I never hung up the phone with my fiancé, who was witnessing this entire unhinged conversation. He felt like something was clearly not right and he didn't want to take any chances, so he called the police and told them what I was dealing with, an unruly and potentially hostile customer. Well, I have never been more thankful for my fiancé because during the man's rant, he did start becoming hostile. He stormed back over to the beef jerky and knocked over the entire display. Even though this guy was clearly not right, this was the first moment that I actually felt unsafe. After knocking over the display, he turned and looked at me, and his eyes were almost indescribable. They looked void of any emotion. At that moment, 2 cop cars pulled up and the man didn't even flinch. He didn't move. He just stood over by the rack and continued to stare at me. The cops walked inside, and to their credit, they didn't overreact and remained cool and calm. One of the police officers came to me and made sure that I was all right, which I was. The other officer went over to the man and was talking to him quietly. I couldn't make out any of the words the cop was saying to the man. The man looked upset but didn't lose his temper as he did moments ago, and the officers escorted him out, not in handcuffs or anything like that. They literally just walked outside and had a conversation that lasted a good 20 minutes. One officer left with the man, with the other hanging around at the gas station with me and just making sure the man didn't come back. I have no idea what would have happened if my fiancé wasn't still on the phone and called the police. The man was becoming more and more enraged with every moment. I never saw the guy again, and I never placed any official report, really. After this night, I didn't work another overnight shift. I know some people may have had far worse and more terrifying stories of working overnight, and I feel for those people. However, this was the worst thing that's ever happened to me personally, and even though I left with no physical harm, the fear that I felt that evening just looking at that crazed man is something that will always be burned into my brain. If you enjoyed this scary story, listen to thousands more, either over on the Let's Read YouTube channel or podcast.